I will try to be brief. And I was asked to speak about where might we go from here. And just to be clear, I'm not going to be comprehensive. Instead, I'm going to be focused on a few areas. I'm going to be very opinionated, and I will point to both some places that we might go, which we should desperately try to avoid, but we might not, and some places that we should go, the good place, that I think if we try hard, we will get to. So I need to make my quick disclosures. And the most important disclosure is the last one, which is I am passionately biased towards findings and hypotheses that I believe are sound until they're proven unsound. I think this is the dark matter of conflict of interest. People care the most about the ideas that they have espoused. So it's been an interesting 12 months, almost 12 months, where we've been in this new situation. And what worked and what did not work? I think that helps us think about where to go from here. And so if we look at the very conventional view of medicine, there's assessment, there's treatment, there's a revision of treatment based on seeing how people respond to the treatment, and then reassessment. So what worked in this context? Let's ask the question first about assessment. So I don't know if you can remember but back in February, there were all sorts of hypotheses about what was going to work, what was not going to work, given the fact that this virus went through the ACE receptor. Should people be taken off of ACE inhibitors, or was that helpful? Were anticoagulants helpful or not? So many questions, and we did not even know the most basic thing about these patients. We did not know, did all patients get inflammation? What were the other characteristics of the disease? And the fact is that within 1 week of having any significant amount of patients in your hospital system, you would know, if you had the right tools, you would know the profile of these patients. Yet, the only way we could keep up as doctors in this sense was through phone calls with our colleagues in Europe, the fast yet delayed publication of findings, and it did not have to be so. Shown here is a I2P2 and IOMOP driven collaboration, which I initiated in March, and in 4 weeks, we had characterized across 110 hospitals and 5 countries. Now it's 8 countries and 350 hospitals, but in 4 weeks, we had characterized the clinical course of the patients. And this was all knowable in the first week. So we could see, for example, the inflammation starting from day 1, pretty impressive. The cardiomyopathy, the D dimers rising. We could see the creatinine, the kidney failure, and the transaminitis across all these patients. And in fact, what was interesting was people kept talking about how the countries were different. Well, in fact, what we saw and what we showed in our preprint in March, which was 4 weeks later, we showed that the countries were less different from each other than different hospitals within the countries. But my main point here is to say this was knowable. And what a failure it is of our system that we've invested all this effort, all this money, all this informatics time, and we were not able to do this systematically, because obviously this was not a systematic national or international effort. And I think we really have to ask ourselves why that was and how to avoid that in the future. By the way, parenthetically, I should note another lesion was shown. We were very happy to be published in Digital Medicine afterwards, but it ended up being published 5 months after our analysis. So there's something broken about our publication model, because we had the results fully written up within 4 weeks, and then another 4 months until publication. So what about treatment? So what happened, there was all sorts of talk about what was the right way to treat. And it probably is the case that we overventilated, we were overly aggressive, and probably killed a few people by being over aggressive with ventilation. There was all sorts of rumors about what was the right treatment. And there were literally hundreds of papers on and studies of dozens of treatments, all of which only included hundreds of patients. And therefore, it was not surprising that we were not able to get clarity because we had all these underpowered studies about what was the right way to go. And this was a crucial period when New York, for example, was shooting through the roof in terms of its cases. And so when it comes to assessing the treatment, what's going on, it was remarkable that there was one trial that really made a big difference. And that was the recovery trial in the United Kingdom. And it was the one drug that actually made a big difference. None of the other drugs had a big effect of mortality, but this one drug, this commonly used glucocorticoid, dexamethasone, was shown in this recovery trial to have a massive impact on mortality. It was the only one we had. And it could have been known earlier, but there was only one trial that was sufficiently powered to do that. And when you look at a nice report in Science magazine about why this trial succeeded, you see a number of troubling things. Which is that the other trials had not been randomized. This trial was, but in order to do this, they had to shred their book about how to conduct trials, really focusing on what was important. They had to ride roughshod over their existing IRB processes. The whole research enterprise had to be basically short-circuited in order for them to be effective. And other European countries with socialized medicine, just like the UK, but without doing the short circuits that the UK did, were not able to actually reproduce this kind of performance. And so we really need to understand why that is the case and why our current research infrastructure is really a brake upon progress. As the PI of this trial says, clinical trials have become excessively cumbersome in recent years. It's actually quite hard to make them really simple. Well, I heard that informatics is about information and knowledge processing. Maybe we should have something to say about that. So I think it's fair to, well, I'm going to argue that we are not driving progress in medicine. We in informatics are not driving progress in medicine, even though we all believe, I hope, that medicine is at its core an information processing discipline. And I think that's a significant indictment of our field, and we should therefore wonder, where can we go from here? We have been very involved in EHR deployments, and the fact that there's been all this talk about burnout, it did not happen accident. It didn't just appear. It happened on our watch. We did not say much about it. We are the professional society for informatics. There was not a big hue and cry about this crippling not only of informatics, but of the lifeblood of medicine, taking doctors away from their patients, slowing them down, causing documentation to replace sleep time. These are huge effects. Also, if you see this absolutely stunning paper in JAMA about the use of convolutional neural networks to diagnose retinopathy, very impressive. And with performance, certainly surpassing the average ophthalmologist and equaling those of perhaps the performance of the top ophthalmologists. And in this paper that appeared in JAMA, really run out of Google, the main contribution of doctors was not in developing the algorithms, really, it was only one thing, just labeling the images, retinopathy, not retinopathy. Does not seem to me the role that I would hope for doctors in here. And since we are in this era of artificial intelligence, where we've seen major programs that use reinforcement learning to become champions higher in performance than any human in chess and Go, the question is, what does this portend for medicine? So when does medicine succumb to AlphaZero? For those of you who don't know what AlphaZero is, it is the reinforcement learning program that was developed that basically plays itself. And in playing itself in Go and chess, it not only discovered some winning plays, but it also rediscovered all the plays of the old masters, and then discovered even better new plays, and became absolutely dominant. Can we use this in medicine? Now, it's important to know why this reinforcement learning program worked in chess and Go. Deterministic system, fully observed, no hidden variables. The action space is discrete, it's not continuous. They have access to a perfect simulator, the game itself. And each episode is relatively short. Evaluation is clear, whether you're winning or losing, and you can do trial and error. And there's large data sets of human play. These are not characteristic of physiology, not characteristic of disease course, not characteristic of drug response, and not of surgery. They're neither deterministic, fully observed, discrete, and we have no access to a perfect simulator. So what part of medicine will succumb to this kind of reinforcement learning? Well, very simply, the game of reimbursement. So if you're looking at the dark side versus the evil side, or the dark side versus the light side, reinforcement learning can really play the games of the rules, the discrete rules of reimbursement, and to minimizing and maximizing healthcare utilization and referral approval. It's not going to be as helpful for doctors' advice or maximizing patients' utility over all achievable treatment plans. And so there's a real risk that the big breakthroughs, if we're not careful, in AI that really matter, that really will be adopted, will be this unintended consequence, just as the current state of EHRs had the unintended consequences because of the primacy of their role in getting accurate billing. Because reinforcement learning specifically is able to excel at these discrete problem domains, such as reimbursement, and because if you look where the money is, that's in reimbursement, that might be where we go. But let me say that there is another path. The late October showed us the path. I want to remind everybody who has forgotten that Octo and his crew of MIT undergrads, when he was at MGH, developed a MUMPS operating system, database programming language, and a real-time operating system that continues actually to be the basis of most of the leading vendors, EHRs. And it was a wonderful system. And as first constructed by him, it really, really transformed to the better the lives of doctors. And I think so I think there's a good way forward. In this article that I published in the New England Journal of Medicine with Alvin and Jeff Dean from Google, we identified one of the most important areas would be to actually identify ways in which the daily workflow of medicine can be improved. And suffice it to say that using a microphone and a camera, more likely a set of microphones and a set of cameras in the examining room, it is well within reach of today's technology that informaticians can actually push it to the point that we will have the equivalent of a highly diligent medical student listening to everything that has been said by doctor and patient, watching everything that's done, and creating a very nice, accurate summary of what happened, what was decided, what was assessed, what was planned, and even generate the billing codes and allow this to be edited by the clinician after the visit in a much, much faster way. If we can do that, which we can, this will improve medicine, and most importantly, perhaps, it's going to improve the lives of doctors, allow them to go back to the patients and regain the most fun, enjoyable part of medicine. Another way we can think about going forward is perhaps foreshadowed by when Ken Mandel came into my office saying, we have this big investment in the EHRs under the Obama administration. What should we be worried about? Should it be interoperability? I said interoperability, yes, but that's I instantly fall asleep when people talk about interoperability. Perhaps we should talk about substitutability, the ability to any app on all EHRs. And that led to a article, it led to a grant from ONC with a number of players, and it led to the development of the SMART API, which has now been recently endorsed by the 21st Century Cures Act. But it turns out that was not enough. What really made a change was that another doctor made a leap. And our colleague here from Duke implemented Smart and Fire on top of the Epic system. And that was nice, but more importantly, he was then acquired by Apple. And when he went to Apple, he then made sure that the Smart and Fire API was now being rolled out through Apple Health, through hundreds of hospitals, and it looks like probably within 2 years, 1,400 hospitals throughout the United States. And that creates a transformative opportunity. The patients are actually going to have access to their data. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that apps that we informaticians can generate will now be able to have, if access is delegated to us to the Apple Health data, our apps can now provide decision support both to the patients and to the doctors using this newly freed source of information. And so in a nutshell, I think we have a data liberation movement through the consumer that finally is going to happen. And so,
Zach.
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much for everything. Just a heads up that we are almost out of time.
Okay,
15 minutes
60 seconds.
Fast. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
60 seconds. All right. So when you look at all these stakeholders, and you think about the problems that we saw that I discussed at the beginning, I think there's a missing group of individuals. I'll call them health system rounders that are mostly embedded in our institutional care systems, but form the link for communications to the consumer with public health and with the multi-level infrastructure that goes from the doctors, EHRs, to public communications, to the public health monitoring systems. And those individuals will round on the healthcare system, much like we round on patients. Their responsibility will be towards the healthcare system. They'll do something that we don't do these days, which in the emergency room, we always run mock codes, so we know how to do a code. We need to have health-wide system mock codes. We need to provide patient direct support, because we've seen that health communications have been very problematic, and the trust of the public and both doctors and public health is very low, and perhaps for good reason. I think we need to start asking if we really believe what we're selling, this kind of implementation will be required for JCHO reimbursement. And in other words, you don't get paid if you're not rounding on your healthcare system. I think that's the way forward. And it's directly reporting to leadership. So this is not an academic exercise. This is what it takes to run a hospital or a public health system. And those people at the center are going to have to be people that look a lot like AMIA membership, highly numerate, informatics enabled. So in summary, what I think the way forward is to transform clinical practice, to bring it back to the clinician-patient encounter using novel methods of interaction with our information systems. Make patients not the nominal, but legal and active controller of their data and decision-making. I would ask for serious consideration of this notion of health system rounders, whose primary responsibility are healthcare systems, that they inhabit them and they embed and they're embedded as players within the therapeutic triangle that I showed at the beginning, with primary responsibility to the public. That's it. Thank you very much.
Clap. Thank you. Thank you very much, Zach. I know that you need to run in a few minutes. We're going to go ahead and continue on with our program. But if you want to do a little Q&A in the chat, we already have one great question from Peter Emby. Feel free to use the chat.
All right. Let me see. Let me see. All right. Right. So just to state the obvious, right now, we make our young people cynical about the notes because the department chairs keep telling them, we're not going to get paid if you don't do the notes. And so, of course, that leads to cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. I do think that we train our clinicians well. And so that if you indeed had a system that served, like I described, as the meticulous medical student documenting the counter, I think that you could actually tune that system so it really is a faithful representation of the assessment and the clinical plan. Now, it can be used after the fact to play the usual games around reimbursement, because I don't think that with a magic wand we can change the way we reimburse medicine. That would certainly be a game-changing thing to change the way we reimburse medical care. But I think if we want to be realistic, that's not going to happen in the near term. So I think by changing the documentation process so that it's focused, as I described, on what the physician is doing in the counter and saying in the encounter and observing the encounter. Yes, there may be downstream products that are of that data exhaust that are optimized for reimbursement. But the point is there will be some, at first blush, something that is fundamentally about the patient visit, summarizing the patient visit. So, all right.